All right, buckle up, everybody, because we're about to dive into something that might just make your brain do a few somersaults.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about that mathematical mystery that always seems to cause a bit of a stir.
Mm,
Division by zero.
yeah.
The big no-no of the math world. You wanted to know why it's such a taboo, and honestly, we did too.
Yeah.
So we did a little digging,
Mm,
went down the Wikipedia rabbit hole,
mm,
checked out some pretty intense forum discussions on Reddit,
right.
even brushed up on some basic math explanations. And let me tell you, the logic behind this seemingly simple rule,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly deep.
It is really fascinating, isn't it? I mean, most of us learned about this rule in school like it was this unshakable truth, you know?
Right.
But maybe we didn't really fully understand the why.
Yeah.
It's not just an arbitrary rule from math teachers. This
Right.
is like a fundamental principle that's woven into the very fabric of mathematics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to break it down. Like, why can't you just divide something into zero groups?
Right.
And what happens if you try? Like, what are the consequences? We've got a whole stack of sources here, from simple explanations on websites like Free Math Help
Mm-hmm.
to more in-depth stuff about like historical attempts to make sense of it, and even, like different mathematical systems.
Right. Right. Let's start with the basics.
Okay.
When we're talking about division, we're essentially talking about splitting things into groups,
Mm,
equal groups.
right.
Like imagine you're splitting a pizza with your friends, you're dividing the slices up equally.
Yeah,
Or you're splitting a bill at a restaurant, you're dividing that total cost.
makes sense. Okay, so then where does zero fit into all of this?
Well, imagine trying to divide those pizza slices into zero groups.
Okay.
Like, can you picture that? It just doesn't make sense conceptually.
Right. It's like trying to put something into a box that doesn't exist.
Exactly. You can't divide something into nothing. It's not about the size of the group.
Right.
It's about the absence of a group altogether.
Okay.
And this is where things start to get really interesting because this seemingly simple problem
Yeah.
has some pretty big implications for the whole system of mathematics.
Okay. So dividing by zero, it's like a glitch in the matrix.
In a way, yes. To understand why, let's think about how division relates to multiplication.
Okay.
They're inverse operations, meaning they undo each other.
Mm-hmm.
If you divide 10 by 2, you get 5.
Right.
Multiply 5 by 2, you're back to 10.
Right. So far, so good.
But what happens if you try to do that with 0?
Oh, okay.
So let's say you try to divide 7 by 0.
Okay.
Now, to check that, you'd multiply the result by 0.
Right.
But anything multiplied by 0 is always 0.
Right.
We'll never get back to that original number, 7 in this case.
Ah. So it's not just a matter of like not being able to picture it.
Right.
It creates this mathematical impossibility.
Exactly. And this is why that website, Free Math Help, puts it so dramatically. Don't do it. It's bad.
Oh,
Very bad. Never divide by 0.
right.
It's not just a rule. It's like a safeguard against creating contradictions
Mm-hmm.
and inconsistencies in the whole system of mathematics.
So now it's starting to feel less like a rule and more like some kind of like fundamental law of the math universe.
Right.
And that makes me wonder what kind of chaos would happen if we could divide by zero.
That's a great question. And it's one that mathematicians have wrestled with for centuries.
Right.
Some have even tried to define division by 0, but those attempts always led to more problems than they solved.
Yeah. Like that example we found on Wikipedia about the Indian mathematician Brahmagupta.
Yes. He proposed that any number divided by 0 would equal infinity.
Okay.
Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah.
But it turns out defining division by 0 that way leads to all sorts of logical contradictions.
Right.
Like being able to prove that 1 equals 2.
Wait, what? How does dividing by zero lead to like such absurd conclusions?
Well, let me show you. Imagine we just pretend for a second that 1 divided by 0 equals some number. Let's just call it x.
Okay.
Now, based on the rules of multiplication, if we multiply both sides of that equation by 0,
Mm-hmm.
we get 1 equals 0 times x.
But anything multiplied by zero is zero, right?
Exactly. So we end up with the equation 1 equals 0.
Okay.
Clearly, something's not right there.
Yeah.
This is, it's a simplified example, but it shows how allowing division by 0 can just unravel that whole logical framework of mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
leading to all kinds of crazy results.
So it's not just about avoiding getting an error message on our calculator.
Right.
It's about preserving the integrity of like mathematical logic itself.
Exactly. And this seemingly simple rule, it's even caused problems in the real world.
So really?
We found an interesting account on Wikipedia about the USS Yorktown. It was a Navy ship, and a division by zero error crashed their entire computer system.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this isn't just theoretical. This can have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. But even with those potential pitfalls, some mathematicians have explored alternative systems where division by zero might actually be possible.
Interesting. Is that where this Riemann sphere thing comes in? I saw that mentioned in one of our sources.
You're right. Wolfram MathWorld talks about that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty complex concept. It
Okay.
deals with a very specific area of math called complex analysis. But even there, it doesn't mean that 1 divided by 0 equals infinity in a straightforward way.
Okay.
It's they have these completely different rules
Right.
and definitions to handle those concepts.
Gotcha. So probably not something we'd use to split the pizza bill then.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But it does show that even with something as seemingly impossible as dividing by zero,
Right.
there are still mathematical minds out there pushing the boundaries, exploring those edges of what's possible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So we've established that dividing by zero, huge no-no in the world of like traditional math.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, why do you think this concept causes so much debate and even sparks those like conspiracy theories, like that one we saw in that Reddit thread?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I think it comes from that human desire to find patterns and make sense of the world around us.
Right.
When we hit a rule that seems totally arbitrary, like you can't divide by zero,
Yeah.
it's natural to question it.
Especially when the reason for it dives into this like really complex mathematical concepts.
Yeah.
That might be hard for like the average person to grasp.
Exactly. But instead of accepting that there might not be a simple answer,
Right.
some folks jump to the conclusion that there must be some kind of secret
Right.
that's being kept from us, a conspiracy to keep this knowledge hidden away.
Like mathematicians are just hoarding all these secrets of the universe just to like make our lives harder or something.
Exactly. But as we've seen,
Yeah.
the reality is far less dramatic,
Yeah.
but arguably way more fascinating.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like this idea of dividing by zero
Right.
leads us down this rabbit hole of logic, history, and even like touches on the philosophical nature of math itself.
Absolutely. And it really highlights how even the most fundamental rules of mathematics aren't arbitrary.
Right.
They're deeply connected to the logical framework that, like, underpins our understanding of the universe.
So it's not about some like secret math club.
Yeah.
It's about the logic of math itself. And, you know, speaking of logic, it makes me think, like, if we could somehow define division by zero, wouldn't that just, like, completely change everything we know about math?
It would definitely have some huge implications. Remember we were talking about how dividing by zero leads to all those contradictions?
Right.
Like proving that 1 equals 2?
Right.
Well, if we just say those contradictions are okay, we're basically throwing out all the rules of logic.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's why websites like Free Math Help are so adamant about not even trying.
Yeah.
But couldn't there be some system, like some alternate set of rules, where division by zero is possible, but doesn't create those contradictions?
That's a question that has intrigued mathematicians for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there actually are some theoretical frameworks out there where division by zero is explored.
Okay.
We touched on the Riemann sphere a little bit earlier,
Right.
but that's just one example.
Right.
There are other systems, like certain types of projective geometry, where the whole concept of infinity is handled differently.
No.
And division by zero might actually be defined within those very specific rules.
So it's not completely off the table, at least in, like, the world of theoretical mathematics.
Right, exactly. But even in those systems, it's important to remember that defining division by zero doesn't just, poof, make it this simple operation.
Right.
It often means introducing all these brand new concepts and rules.
Yeah.
And even rethinking what numbers even are.
So it sounds like a mathematical rabbit hole that could lead to some pretty wild ideas.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. And while those explorations might not have, like, immediate practical uses,
Right.
they push the boundaries of how we understand math.
Yeah.
And they challenge us to think about familiar concepts in totally new ways.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like mathematicians are these explorers charting out the unknown territories of the math universe.
I like that. That's a great analogy. And just like explorers sometimes stumble upon these unexpected discoveries.
Right.
Exploring the boundaries of mathematics could lead to these unexpected insights.
Right.
That might have some really far-reaching implications down the road. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe someday some of those abstract explorations
Yeah.
could lead to big breakthroughs in other fields like physics
Yeah.
or even computer science.
Oh, that's interesting. Now that you mentioned computer science, it reminds me of that thing with the USS Yorktown that we were talking about earlier.
Oh, right.
Division by zero error took down that whole ship's computer system, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
It's a pretty good reminder that even though we're talking about, like, theoretical math here,
Uh-huh.
it can have very real
It
consequences.
absolutely can. Computers, they're these incredibly powerful tools,
Mm-hmm.
but they run on these very strict logical principles. When you throw something like division by zero into the mix, it just throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Can lead to all sorts of errors and crashes, unpredictable behavior.
So it's not just about, like, avoiding those mathematical contradictions.
Right.
It's about making sure our technology works the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. And this is why programmers, computer scientists, they're very aware of these potential problems with dividing by zero.
Mm-hmm.
They build safeguards into software to prevent it from happening in the first place,
Right.
or at least try to handle it gracefully if it does happen.
That makes sense. It's like having like a safety net in place to avoid that mathematical free fall. But I'm curious, like, if computers are so susceptible to those division by zero errors, why not just program them to deal with it differently? Couldn't they just say undefined or something like that?
Well, in a lot of cases, that's what they do.
Right.
Programming languages often have ways of dealing with division by zero without causing the whole system to crash.
Okay.
They might return an error message, a special value like infinity or nan, which means not a number.
Okay.
Or they might trigger something called an exception
Yeah.
that lets the program handle the situation in a more controlled way.
Gotcha. So it's not always a total disaster.
Right.
But I imagine there are situations where a division by zero error could have some pretty serious consequences.
Definitely. Especially in really critical systems like those used in aircraft,
Right.
medical devices, financial transactions, even what seems like a small error can cause a cascade of problems.
Yeah.
That's why software engineers work so hard to prevent these kinds of errors in the first place. They use things like rigorous testing procedures, code reviews, and all sorts of fancy software development methods to make sure that their code is robust and reliable.
So it's like building a mathematical fortress to protect against those pesky division by zero gremlins.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights how important it is to understand the potential pitfalls
Right.
and to take steps to avoid them. And this kind of brings us back to that idea that mathematics isn't just some abstract concept stuck in textbooks.
Yeah.
It's the foundation of so much of our technology.
Yeah.
And understanding its principles, even those that seem kind of obscure, like this whole can't divide by zero thing,
Right.
is super important for building a world that works reliably and safely.
That's a really great point. It's like that old saying, the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And sometimes those seemingly little details, like a simple division operation, can have these enormous consequences.
Exactly. And it just underscores how important it is to pay attention to the fundamentals,
Yeah.
even when they seem basic or trivial.
Yeah.
Because that entire structure of mathematics, it rests on those basic principles.
I think we've done a good job, like, really unpack the logic behind dividing by zero. But I'm curious, what does this all mean for the average person who's not a mathematician or a computer scientist?
That's a great question. I think the main takeaway is that even if you don't get all the complex mathematical reasoning behind it, understanding that there are good reasons for certain rules,
Right.
even the ones that seem kind of arbitrary,
Yeah.
can help you appreciate how logical the world around us really is.
So it's not just about memorizing the rules.
Right.
It's about understanding that there's a reason for them.
Right.
A reason that might be way deeper and more complex than we initially thought.
Precisely. And I think that's a valuable lesson that goes way beyond math, you know? It encourages us to question our assumptions, to dig a little deeper, to seek out a deeper understanding, and to appreciate the beauty of a world that's governed by these logical principles.
That's a really cool perspective.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, don't just accept the rule, try to figure out why the rule is there in the first place.
Exactly. And who knows, that exploration might just lead you down a path of discovery and understanding that you never expected.
Yeah, it's like that feeling when you finally, like, understand something that you thought was just impossible before.
It is.
It's not just about the knowledge itself. It's like that whole journey of discovery and realizing that there's always more to learn.
Yeah, that's the beauty of intellectual curiosity, isn't it? It just opens these new worlds
Right.
and expands our understanding of not just math, but like you said, everything around us.
And, it's funny. We started this deep dive trying to understand why we can't divide by zero.
Right.
But now
Yeah.
I'm like kind of fascinated by what would happen if we could.
Yeah, that's the power of these thought experiments, right? They let us sort of explore the boundaries of what we know
Right.
and imagine these alternative realities.
Yeah, it's like those sci-fi stories where they bend the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of crazy mathematical universe would we be living in if we could just divide by zero?
It really sparks the imagination. Would it lead to all these new mathematical discoveries? Would
Mm.
it change how we understand the universe?
Yeah,
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's a really cool idea to think about.
yeah. Maybe someday some brilliant mathematician will figure out a way to make sense of dividing by zero without breaking all the rules.
Right.
But until then, I guess we just have to appreciate the system we have.
I think that's a great point to end on. It's not just about memorizing a rule.
Mm.
It's about understanding and appreciating that intricate logical structure of math.
Right.
And who knows, maybe this will inspire someone listening to go explore the world of math a little bit deeper.
Yeah, maybe they'll even discover some new mathematical concept that just like blows our minds.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But even if you don't become the next great mathematician, just understanding the logic behind these seemingly simple rules,
Mm.
like why you can't divide by zero, can give you a whole new appreciation for the power and the beauty of math.
Absolutely. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into this very perplexing world of division by zero,
Yeah.
a concept that, at first seems simple, but it really opens up all these fascinating questions
It does.
and insights.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to explore some of those questions yourself. So until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep.